Hello there, everybody. Welcome along to the Raw podcast. My name's James Copley from the Sunderland Echo, and today I'm joined by Dafydd Pritchard from BBC Sport Wales. He's going to be helping us preview Sunderland's game against Cardiff at the Stadium of Light in the Championship this weekend. Daff, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me along.
Anytime. Let's jump straight into it. Cardiff's last game against Burnley, 2-1 loss at home. For those that don't know, my dad's actually a Cardiff fan as well. I spoke to him last weekend and he says it just feels like Cardiff are sort of treading water at the moment, just above those relegation places. How do you see it?
I think that could apply really for the last 4 or 5 years. It's been a pretty lean period for Cardiff. They've had back-to-back relegation fights in the last few seasons. They steadied things under Errol Bullitt last season, comfortable mid-table finish. And I think the feeling among fans this coming season was that they could probably build on that. I think people recognise that a playoff push is probably beyond them, but to be back scrapping for their lives in the bottom half of the table, that wasn't what people had in mind. So Bullitt paid the price for that. He left in September. And Omar Reza, who'd come in last summer just as a first-team coach, he was given the reins initially as a caretaker boss, and now he's got the job. I say permanently. He's only got it until the end of the season, and no one seems to last long at Cardiff over the past decade or so. So yeah, treading water, I think, is a good phrase. Very accurate for Cardiff at the moment. I think once again, I think they'll just be happy to survive this season.
But there was a big uplift, wasn't there, when Bullitt left and Omar Reza came in? That seems to have tailed off a little bit, Duff.
Yeah, that's fair to say as well. You know, there was the classic bounce. Reza, very well liked by the players, hasn't managed at this level before. Very limited managerial experience in total, actually. Non-league, a little bit in League Two. You can tell he's someone who's happy on the training ground. The players really responded to him. And then, yeah, within a month of him getting the job, they had back-to-back wins against Plymouth and Portsmouth. And that got the club a bit more buoyant again. And the performance levels have been better. But whereas last season, probably the results were better than the performance levels under Bullitt, this season is probably the reverse of that, where they probably haven't got the results that the performances quite deserve. So they've looked better, building attacks. They keep the ball better than they did. Maybe not so defensively solid. You know, clean sheets have been really rare. I think something like 2 in the last 24 championship fixtures they've picked up. And when you don't score that many, it's not exactly a recipe for success. And it's strange because, you know, you speak to fans and overall, I think they'd say they've been more positive than negative about Bullitt. But yeah, the results just aren't there. And they're just not good enough in either box.
I mean, just looking at Cardiff's sort of last couple of results, it almost feels like 1 step forward, 2 steps back all of the time. Cardiff lost to Portsmouth. They drew away to Bristol City, which isn't a bad result. Obviously, it's a little bit of a derby, but the loss to Burnley, beat Hull, but then drew with Plymouth. And, you know, Portsmouth, Plymouth and Hull are all teams around them.
Yeah, exactly. We know, don't we, in the Championship, wherever you are in the table, if you can string together a runner of results, that can really transform your season, because you've got clubs who were felt like just 5 minutes ago looking over their shoulders at the relegation places are now plotting their route to the playoffs. That would be beyond Cardiff at this stage. But yeah, consistency has been a real struggle for them. And if you look at the squad, I think that's the nature of a lot of the players. Callum Robinson's been excellent, their top scorer this season. But other than him, the attacking players tend to blow hot and cold. So someone like Ruben Colwill came through the youth ranks. Everyone at the club is desperate for him to succeed. But he's just not hit the heights that some people saw him reaching when he first broke onto the scene. Someone like Ollie Tanner, Anwar El Ghazi, you know, wingers with lots of talent. And in El Ghazi's case, you know, Premier League experience, but none of them have been able to perform at a consistent level. So they've been reliant on Robinson in attack. Yusuf Salek, who's come in January, bit of an unknown quantity to most people when he arrived from the Swedish top flight. He's big, 6'4", rangy striker, and he's hit the ground running. 5 goals in all competitions, and he's quite an old school centre forward. You know, he just wants to get in the box, score, doesn't care about the other aspects of the game really, and he's gone down well with the fans. So yeah, you can see the shoots of recovery in that squad. They just haven't managed to string it together and put a decent run of results together. They're an inconsistent team, but I mean, the Championship, I know we say it every season, but it just feels even more bonkers than usual this season. There's so many down there who you wouldn't expect to be at the start of the season.
Absolutely. Can we just touch on Ruben Colwill a little bit, actually, because he's a player I actually quite enjoyed watching when I've watched Cardiff this season. And during that mini revival after Bullet was sacked and Omar Reza came in, I thought he was one that really, really produced the goods. Still only 22. How far do you think he could go in the game? And obviously, as well, on the flip side to that, Cardiff producing players is perhaps something they haven't done enough over the years, and that's a real positive, isn't it, that he's coming through?
Yeah, you're spot on. I think that's been a big frustration for the club's fans, that they haven't seen as many youngsters come through in recent years compared to, say, 10, 15 years ago when you had the likes of Aaron Ramsey, Joe Ledley, Adam Matthews coming through. To be fair to them, Bullet and Reza have given chances to youngsters, but Colwill is the one who will draw the most attention, to the point where when I've asked Craig Bellamy about him, he's got quite irate that the Welsh media ask him about Ruben Colwill so much. But I think it's because, you know what it's like, any club's the same. They're desperate for their local lads to succeed, for a youth product to do well. And Colwill, technically, he's got it all. He can use both feet. He's brilliant at taking on a player. He can shoot from distance. He's got a great eye for a pass. But physically is where he's just not up to it at the moment. And that's where club and international managers have been pulling their hair out with him, really. They like him as a player. It's not through lack of effort that he's maybe not registering the kind of physical data that you want from a championship player. He's had issues physically, like he's had injuries. He was strangely still growing until he was maybe 19 or 20. So he's, for a player of that position, he's a big guy as well. He's, best part of 6'4", and it feels like he was kind of getting used to his new body almost. So that kind of impacted his performances. And you speak to coaches at Cardiff, Wales, and opposition coaches, interestingly, people like him. I remember Russell Martin speaking very highly of him when he brought his Southampton team here. Even Jurgen Klopp had nice things to say about him after they played them in the FA Cup. But it's just that feeling that he, at the moment, because he can't really do it physically, whether that's on or off the ball, that's the missing part. So, definitely potential there, but yeah, a bit of an ethereal talent, I think. And I'm not sure if we'll ever see him reach the heights that some people had earmarked for him.
He's from Neath as well, isn't he? Which means you certainly wouldn't mess with him.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. If you've ever come across, if you've got any mates from Neath, you'll know. And I don't think he's quite as tough as the Neath rugby boys from that area, but a nice lad. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Let's zoom out a bit in terms of Cardiff City as a club. Sunderland last played Sheffield Wednesday away, and I did a preview pod with Alex Miller, who covers the Owls for the Star in Sheffield. And I feel like ownership of the two clubs, Sheffield Wednesday and Cardiff City, is very, very similar in a sense that the owners feel quite distant, but they've also been there a long time. There's frustration, almost bordering on apathy at the two clubs. Vincent Tan did lead Cardiff into the Premier League for a season, but it's been slim pickings, really, hasn't it, since then?
Yeah, that's a good comparison to draw, because like you said, he came in, took him to the Premier League in 2013, but that was after this really controversial rebrand where he changed the club's shirts from blue to red. Some people went along with it. Some people turned their back on the club, boycotted it, and haven't been back since. And really, since then, you've had this kind of fracture in the club, in the fan base. There've been good times since. They went back to blue in 2015. Neil Warnock took them up to the Premier League in 2018. And that felt like quite a kind of unifying season. It felt like the old Cardiff then. But I think as long as Vincent Tan is there, there'll always be this kind of unease for a lot of fans. And it's not just Tan himself. A lot of fans are unhappy with how the club is run. So the chairman, Mehmet Dalman, and the chief executive, Ken Chu, they've both been there more than 10 years now. And there's a feeling that they probably lack football expertise at that level. So earlier this season, for example, before the South Wales derby in January, there was a big protest. Fans met a couple of miles away from the stadium. There's probably a few hundred, maybe 1,000, and they marched over to the stadium, chanted for Tan to leave and the rest of the board to leave. So before then, use the word apathy, and I would say that was the case. That attendances were falling. There was a real sense of apathy around the club, but I think that has turned into anger, and I think people have felt a bit more energised recently. Because I think everyone knows, Cardiff aren't a club of, say, Sunderland's standing. They're not going to get 40,000 every week in massive stadiums, but it's a big club with a big catchment area. Not many clubs around. You've got the South Wales Valleys who historically get behind the club. So it's a club with massive potential, and I just think, a lot of damage has been done under Tan, and I think it'll take a long time for that to heal. And I think people just want to see a plan. I think the fans want to know what the plan is for the club going forward. Vincent Tan spent a lot of money keeping them afloat, and a lot of fans want to see him leave, but then you'd worry for the club's medium-term future if he was to, because they are so reliant on him financially, in terms of the loans that he's given them, the debt that they owe him. And the same is true of Dalman to a lesser extent. A lot of these people are financially heavily invested in the club. So I think a lot of fans would like to see them go, but, you mentioned Sheffield Wednesday there. There's no guarantee that you get back to the good times quickly. I know they're going well this season in the Championship. It's been a long time, isn't it? Spent time in League One. And Wednesday, Sunderland, these clubs who've been down to the third tier, they are objectively bigger clubs than Cardiff, so if they were to drop down, there's no guarantee that they'd come back. So I'd say it's been a pretty fraught few years here, and people would like to see change, but there's no guarantee that change would actually help the club immediately.
No, I absolutely hear what you're saying about the size of the club. I've always thought Cardiff's a big club. It's in a capital city as well, in a huge catchment area, as you mentioned. It's interesting though, isn't it? Because where is the end game for Vincent Tan? What is he getting by holding on to the club? I don't think he's been to a Cardiff game for quite some time either, has he? So, League One or the Premier League, what is he holding on for? And is there interest in the club? Has there been interest, or is it a case of nobody being around? Because I often think in this era of football booming, then there are definitely worse prospects than Cardiff to take hold of. And you look in Wales at Wrexham and how they're building.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a good question. What is Vincent Tan holding out for? There's been some interest over the last 10 years. And although they've not officially said the club is for sale, I think unofficially the sense from the club is if there was a big offer that Vincent Tan was open to, then maybe they would sell. There's also a case of, is there a degree of sunken cost fallacy with it? Does he feel like he's in too deep, and does he feel like they need to get back to the Premier League before he can sell? Because he has spent so much money on the project. But as you said, he's a very distant owner in the sense that I don't think he's been here this season. He was here for the Boxing Day game last season. I know he speaks to the manager and the chairman and the chief exec frequently, but that's another criticism that's levelled against Tan and his board, that none of them are here all that often. You don't often see Mehmet Dalman and Ken Chu at games either. And when you don't have a kind of sporting director or director of football, then there's a feeling that above the manager, there's no real, football authority there. So, again, come back to treading water. Your opening question. I think there's a feeling that Vincent Tan maybe himself is kind of treading water. I want to keep this club afloat. It's too costly an asset for me to just get rid of. But at the moment, there's been no kind of firm or serious interest elsewhere. But you get the impression that, like you say, you'd imagine it's a decent prospect, isn't it? If you want to invest in a club, there's a chance for growth there, isn't there? If you're buying in the Championship or lower rather than the Premier League. But as things stand, I think the club in general, top to bottom, is kind of treading water.
It's sad, isn't it? These sort of 100-year-old plus institutions of British football are solely reliant on one man, and if that man decides to pull the plug, as Ellis Short did with Sunderland, it can go wrong. We'll quickly move on to current affairs. Cardiff's form against Sunderland does amuse me, as I say, especially with my father and brother being Cardiff fans. They've won the last 2 games 1-0 at the Stadium of Light, but Sunderland have won their last 3 in Cardiff. So it's very mixed, isn't it? The form between the two teams. What are you expecting, Daff?
Although I don't necessarily think the results will carry on in the same pattern, I wouldn't be surprised if the kind of the pattern of the game carried in the same way, because those 1-0 wins were your archetypal kind of smash and grab wins, weren't they? Yeah, and there was a lot of that in the Bullet. Your glass half full types would say there was a team that had good resilience. Your glass half empty would say, they were cheating the underlying stats. The XG wasn't good enough. And eventually that came to fruition at the start of this season. Sunderland are going great guns. I've really enjoyed watching them this season. So you'd expect them to have the better of the game. Cardiff, they're a funny team when they come up against big teams. On the one hand, you think they'd be well set up to try and soak up a bit of pressure, hit teams on the counter, but they've come unstuck doing that recently. They've not been kind of defensively solid enough for that. I mean, Leeds United was a horror show. They lost 7-0 away. And there was a feeling, you're chatting to club staff, coaches, players, they didn't dismiss it completely, but there was a kind of feeling that you can almost park that just because Leeds are so strong. But I think they'll in for a long afternoon, I think, at Sunderland, who are, flying this season. And I'm sure it could get a little bit twitchy if it takes a while to score, but Cardiff have started games poorly recently as well. I think that's a big part of it. So, think of Portsmouth away, such an important game, 2 clubs towards the bottom of the table, and Cardiff are 2-0 down after 15 minutes. So they've got this tendency to start slowly and improve as games go on. But I imagine if they start slowly and let Sunderland score, it could be a long afternoon for them, I think. So I think, I'm not exactly, reinventing the wheel, but I imagine Sunderland's would be strong favourites, yeah.
It's interesting you say that, actually, because Sunderland's home form is dipped off a little bit in recent times. Obviously, they lost to Hull City. There was disappointing draws against Plymouth and Watford as well, just off the top of my head. But Sunderland against Hull and in general at home tend to start bright. And that Hull City game was weird because Sunderland sort of dominated for about the opening 8 or 9 minutes. Hull City weathered the storm. And after that, Sunderland sort of really retreated into the shell. So I reckon if Cardiff can gain some confidence maybe in that opening 20 minutes and put on a good defensive display, given what's happened in the past with this Cardiff team, a lot of which are the same players, actually, that I think it could be potentially a little bit of a long afternoon for Sunderland. Sunderland really need to win these 2 home games. They've got Cardiff on Saturday, Preston on Tuesday. They're 8 points behind Sheffield United, so they're looking like they're going to need a big swing. You have to win those 2 home games, which, as we know, in football and in the Championship and just with Sunderland in general, it's never that simple. So that's my worry, Daff, coming into the game.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned the whole game, because I was thinking about that, because they won there not long before. I'm not even sure it was immediately before they came down to Cardiff, and they were dreadful. Hell, it was a terrible game. First half was one of the worst I've seen in a long time. Even Omar Riza himself said his eyes were hurting after the first half.
That's a great quote. That is a great quote.
Which tells you everything, really. So, yeah, that's the one thing that Cardiff can kind of cling on to, maybe, that, might get a little bit frustrating for Sunderland if they don't have their way straight away. I think they'd be better off having a go, Cardiff, because I think they've shown that they're not really capable of holding better teams at the moment. So they're better off, I think.
I think
Sunderland
would prefer that, though. I think they look really good when they can hit teams on the break. They have looked at times better away from home, certainly in an attacking sense, when they've got a little bit of room on the break.
Yeah, and Cardiff came a cropper against that exact approach, didn't they? Here in the opening weekend. So, there's quality in that Sunderland team as well, and they looked like a well-coached team whenever I've watched them this season. Even in the games I've seen them lose, there's a clear idea of how they want to play, and you've got enough individual quality in that team, haven't you, to make a difference? Whereas, with Cardiff, Reza has tried different approaches. He's tried different formations. He's played 3 at the back. He's gone for 4 at the back. He's tried midfielders in defence and vice versa. So he's left no stone unturned. But you're just not sure if they've really got the makeup to soak up too much pressure. So it'll be that fine balance of not leaving yourselves open to Sunderland, who are clearly a superior team, but trying to pose enough of a threat that they're not just kind of inviting pressure all game, because that hasn't gone well for them at times recently.
If you had to hang your hat on a formation for Cardiff on Saturday, what would it be? And I guess the question's twofold in a sense as well. You mentioned that game on the opening day, that was back in August now. So what are the key differences between Cardiff then and Cardiff now?
I think the key differences are, you mentioned shape there. That has changed. So Reza, particularly away from home, has used a wing-back system. Mainly, I think, because maybe there wasn't the trust in the centre-backs that there was previously. You've got personnel changes. So someone like Andy Rinomhota was completely on the periphery under Bullet, a central midfielder by trade, but he's had a great second half to the season, playing as a right-back under Reza. And there's a bit more of an emphasis on keeping the ball, trying to play it into wide areas, and trying to be a bit more expansive in an attacking sense. So you might see them line up with 3 at the back, Rinomhota and Callum O'Dowda as the wing backs, maybe. They've signed a guy called Sivert Mansverk on loan from Ajax, and he looks like a decent prospect in central midfield. Aaron Ramsey's back from injury, and he's shown glimpses of his quality since he's come back. So you might expect to see him alongside Mansverk. Then in attack, it's tended to be quite a kind of fluid front 3 of kind of 3 kind of wide forwards. Any 3 of, like Callum Robinson has been playing down the middle quite a lot. Cian Ashford, young academy product, 20-year-old, nippy wide forward, been decent recently. And then whoever's fit out of Will Alves, who they've signed on loan from Leicester on the left, or El Ghazi or Chris Willock. But what we've had recently is Yusuf Salek's come in and offered something slightly different. So a more kind of physical outlet up front. So given his goal-scoring form recently, I'd expect maybe Salek to start up front. If Callum Robinson is fit, you'd expect to see him maybe play off him, and then maybe Cian Ashford on the other wing. So Reza's trying to look for that combination of pace and goals, which has been so lacking in that team recently. But I'd say that's the difference. Trying to attack a bit more pace, a few more goals in the team, and probably a change of shape as well. But watch them play with a back 4 and sit back now. I've said all that. Yeah.
You mentioned Aaron Ramsey being back from injury. How important could he be for Cardiff in the running, with obviously fighting a relegation battle?
I think it could be massive. I think even when he joined, most fans taking emotion out of it, and the golden boy coming back to his boyhood club, they knew that with his injury record, he wasn't going to play 30, 40 games a season. But I don't think they were expecting him to be absent as much as he has. He's barely played this season at all. I don't think he's even to double figures yet, for certainly not for starts. And Reza's said that he's not at a point now in his career, perhaps ever again, where he can play Saturday, Tuesday and repeat it. So they're trying to wrap him up in cotton wool best as they can. So he'll mainly play Saturday to Saturday, and usually will only last an hour to 70 minutes if they can help it. But what you do find is that he's just got these moments of quality that he can still call on. So I did the game against Bristol City a few weeks ago, and it was just when he was coming back, and it looked like Bristol City were going to hold on for a 1-0 win, even though Cardiff had arguably more of the game. Ramsey comes on, Bristol City is sat deep, but he's that one player who can unlock the defence with a through ball and eventually leads to the equaliser. So he will be important, I think. They're not reliant on him because they know that he's fit so rarely, but when he is available, I think he's a potential difference maker. And sometimes you have to kind of pinch yourself. You're like, you've got a club fighting relegation in the Championship, and you're bringing on Aaron Ramsey for little 20-minute cameos. So, yeah, perhaps he could be the difference. And I think the squad in general, there's enough quality there to steer clear, but it's just such a dogfight at the moment down there.
Yeah, absolutely. And how are Cardiff City looking otherwise in terms of injuries heading into the Sunderland game?
They have been pretty unlucky with injuries recently, especially in defence. They've been short of centre backs there. So the likes of Jesper Darland, he's been injured. They've had injuries in midfield as well. People like David Turnbull are long-term absentees, and then the likes of Callum Robinson and Will Alves have been out with these little niggles. So it feels like Reese's never really had a fully fit squad to choose from. They've had a couple of suspensions recently as well, and the goalkeeper Jack Anick, he's out for the season now. So Ethan Horvath's been deputising for him. So it does feel like something's hit them just at the wrong moment at different points this season. So it's a little bit patched up in places, but not ravaged by injury like they were, say, around Christmas, January time. So yeah, a few injury concerns, but not as bad as it's been at points this season.
I forgot about Jack Anick, actually. He's ex-Sunderland youth teamer, ex-Newcastle United youth teamer. His brother Ben played for Sunderland. That feels like a big blow, actually, because I remember speaking to me dad and brother about that, and they were really, really impressed with Jack Anick. And when he was dropped by Bullet, they were pretty annoyed.
Yeah. I remember his brother playing for Sunderland, actually, yeah. And Jack Anick himself, he's been an excellent signing. I think they brought him in initially 2 or 3 years ago as someone to probably play backup. But he's not just played really well, but he's a really popular figure at the club as well. He's actually been captain quite a lot this season, and he's had a really good season. I think I and most fans and other media probably thought that he was harshly treated to lose his place under Bullet. Horvath then made quite a few big mistakes, and since Anick's come back in, he's never looked back really, and he's had a really good season. So yeah, losing him was a blow, although Horvath so far hasn't dropped the clangers that he did previously. So it's not been as big a blow as it might have been, and but definitely a popular figure, and just signed a new contract as well, Anick. So hopefully you'll see him next season in a Championship fixture.
Oh, fantastic. Daff, thank you for joining me. Please tell me a little bit more about yourself, where people can find your work if they want to read a bit more about Cardiff in the build-up to the game.
Well, thanks for having me. So I work for BBC Sport Wales, mainly writing for the BBC Sport website. But if you're ever in Wales, like your dad is, James, you can probably see me on TV news channels and radio stations as well. But yeah, if you do want to know more about Cardiff, give me a follow at Dafydd Pritchard on X, or you can follow us at Sport Wales, and you'll have all the latest on Cardiff there. But yeah, looking forward to the game, and hopefully we can do this all again next season. Well, actually, no, you'll want to be in the Premier League. Sorry, I correct myself. Yeah.
That would be ideal, but I must admit, I do enjoy a trip to South Wales twice a season, because I went to uni in Swansea as well, so it's a special place for me down there. But yeah, Premier League would be nice. Anfield away and stuff would be canny, but I'm holding. I'm not making any predictions on that front, just in case.
It'd be great to see Sunderland back there. Honestly, I've loved having the Sunderland fans down at Cardiff, because I cover Swansea as well. So they're a great club to cover, and. Hope to see you soon, whether it's you guys in the Premier League and then Cardiff and Swansea, hopefully not treading water in the Championship too long.
No, good stuff. Thank you very much for joining us. Thanks to the listener. You can find all of the build-up to the Sunderland Cardiff game over at the Sunderland Echo website. Please check out BBC Sport Wales as well, and thank you once again for joining us.